Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov, good evening. We are together in Mishpat Tzedek. Depending on how far we get, this may or may not be our last class before Rosh Hashanah. I will tell you as soon as we find out how far we get. The favorite part I have about our Bet Midrash is that we learn together forever. So whatever we don't finish this week, we'll do next week. Whatever's not next week will be next month. Not next month, but Hashem. Ad Bi'at Goel Tzedek. I'm on page 56 in the numbers of the actual book in the PDF. There should be 3 stars after the first paragraph. Do you see that? And Rabbi Chaim David Halevy tells us the following. L'sikum hadvarim, to summarize everything that we have said so far in the last months together. Medinat chok umdinat halacha, a state of civil law and a state of Jewish law, enan sotrot zo et zo b'meuma. They do not contradict each other meuma at all. Uleman ha'emet, and truthfully, if we were to tell you, harihen mashlimot zo et zo. They actually are in a relationship that benefits each other. So as people always say that you have to choose if you want to live in a Jewish state of Israel or a democratic state of Israel, and pit those things against each other, the truth is that both the civil side of the state of Israel and the religious side of the state of Israel, not only do they not clash, but they directly complement each other. As we've shown, halacha atzma. Hi Yair. That's my little Yair, you hear him? He's at home. This is the little guy who didn't want me to come give the shiur. Yair, Abba's giving a shiur now. Halacha atzma. Matila. If you listen to some old recordings from far back in the day, I think you can hear different one of my children whining in the background, especially in the days that I was the babysitter. So rabbinit would go work and I would stay with the kids and I would give shiurim with Elchanan playing on the floor. Rabbi, I'm playing here in the corner. Oh Hashem. Halacha atzmam. Everyone has different kinds of rich. Some people, they're rich, they have many houses. Some of them, they go on vacation places. Some people, they get to eat whatever they want. For me, it's I get to, any day of the week, be with my children. Baruch Hashem. Zachiti, I won that. Halacha atzmam. Metilal hamalchut o yorsheha. Halacha itself imposes on the kingship or the inheritors of the Jewish kingdom, whichever government they may be, kol manhigut musmechet v'chukit, any authoritative legal entity that rules over the Jewish people. Lehatkin takanot ulchokek chukim hatoamim et tzorchei hachayim v'atpatchutam. It gives them the responsibility of legislating new laws to fix the system in whatever way is needed that is based on the needs of life and the development of society. Ki b'Torah atzma lo ba'u lemaaseh ela yesodot ve'ekronot. Because if we had to tell you, in the arena of civil law, the Torah contains inside of it only basic foundations and principles. Al pihem uvehetem lahem anu chayavim lechaven et chukenu. And based on those principles, and according to those principles, we will then mold our own laws. But the Torah of running a government, of running a Jewish state, is not as developed. I will not say that in a negative way, in a positive way. It is not as set in stone in terms of the details as other areas of halacha might be. V'zot hi ma'alata v'chashivuta shel Torah. And this is perhaps one of the greatest things about the Torah. אילו הייתה נותנת לנו חוקים רבים, ברורים ומוגדרים, המקיפים את כל מערכות החיים לכל פרטיהם. If the Torah were to give us a manual of thousands and thousands and thousands of laws with more thousands of details, ועליהם אין יותר מה להוסיף, and it's such a developed legal code that there's nothing more to add to it. היה ללא ספק כולל בראש ובראשונה it would primarily include kama krachim aved keres, some huge volumes. וכעבור דורות מעטים בלבד, היה מתיישן לחלוטין. And those thick volumes of Jewish legal code, over a very quick period of time, would become completely old and obsolete. ואילו עתה, but the way the Torah is built today, כל חוקיה ומשפטיה של תורה קיימים ועומדים בכל מלוא רעננותם לדורות עולם. The way the Torah is built right now, that all of those foundational principles are alive and well, they're breathing, they're kicking, they're here. על פיהם בונה לו כל דור משטר חיים הרצוי לו. And based on those principles, every generation fills in the details, the blanks that are left between these principles, and builds for themselves a society, a government which they wish to live. I think that when you look at the way that Rabbi Chaim David Halevy looks at halakha, you reach what some would call in my wife's profession an irreconcilable difference between two parties. There are those who feel that the Torah is so perfect that it gives us everything that we need to know. There's no room for human input or innovation. And now, for the rest of eternity, we must live according to this code of law. There's another camp that argues that the Torah is even more perfect than that. The Torah recognizes that being fossilized in some period of time would never allow for the Torah to be relevant to future generations. And therefore, the Torah gives us the guiding foundational principles of the Torah. And it is upon the leadership, the rightful leadership of every generation, to fill in those blanks in accordance with society that they observe as living in front of them. And I can imagine that this approach of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy did not make him the most appreciated Chacham in his generation. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy here adds a beautiful footnote. To appreciate this footnote, I would like for you to open up your Tanakh, whichever Tanakh you have near you, it doesn't matter. It could be Sepharia too. I want you to go to Kehillat. If you look to Kehillat chapter 12, the last chapter in Kehillat, how do you say Kehillat in English? Ecclesiastes. Milashon? How do you say church in Spanish? Iglesia, very good. Iglesia like the word Ecclesiastes, like the word in Hebrew for Kehillat, Kehillat. This is similar words here. Shlomo HaMelech writes in chapter 12, verse 12. I'm jealous, Ashkenazim. They read these books in different holidays throughout the year. Wherever Sephardim don't all read all the other books. At least not publicly. We learn them, but instituted reading of the Beit HaKnesset would be special. Sof davar, no, right before there. V'yoter mehem abeni hizaher. And more than all of this, my son, you should be careful. What should you be careful? Asot sefarim harbe en ketz. Do not make too many books. There's the warning not to make too many books. Is that how you read the pasuk? I'm teaching living people, or we're all sleeping now? Is this how you read the pasuk?
I wouldn't invite this person to your house. Definitely.
This is Shalom HaMelech we're talking about. He says not to write too many books.
Yeah.
Do you have another way to read this pasuk? Yes.
Does he mean that one individual shouldn't write too many books, or does he mean that, like, as a group, the family of the Jewish people shouldn't write too many books, meaning perhaps they will be arguing too much with each other? I know I've heard before that there's books written that are just to put down other people's books.
But those are important books. We have books like that in the Rambam, books of the Shulchan Aruch. They're important books. The books that are there to put down other books. How else are we supposed to learn what it says? Okay, keep reading the pasuk. It says,
I can cheat. I can say Rashi
okay,
explains if we would attempt to write, we would be unable to do so.
so it's too big of a task to try to bite off. Okay, look, Mashloma continues. V'lahag harbe yigat basar. Too much learning wears down the flesh. What do you think from all this?
Are you talking about
Does the word lahag really mean to learn them?
You could tell.
Or to talk in them, or to, vocalize?
Meaning, in this context, to study. V'hagita bo yom v'layla. Okay, for how many people is this the first time they've ever met this pasuk?
It's the first time I've ever thought about it.
Okay, so now help me think about it. Which kind of Shlomo HaMelech, who's the man of wisdom, is telling us that a person shouldn't write too many books? What's the point?
It seems like he's forewarning not to worship Shulchan Aruch and a whole bunch of books that come from that, and worship God there instead. That's not the context of the following. So
Okay, Chesky, keep going. So what are the following psukim? What are the following psukim telling you?
that to keep God in awe, to fear God, that's mitzvah Shemad, and his mitzvahs wiping through his Torah, which he doesn't, his works, and that's all we need to stay connected. We need an abundance of just diving into more and more without realizing the source.
Very good. So if I'm going to tell you here that I think this is a pshat, all you are getting there, but this for me is what Shlomo HaMelech means. Let me explain to you in English. Judaism is not so complicated. Sov davar kol nishma. Once you weigh everything in the world, there's two rules. Et elimira, you must have awe of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a relationship that is real with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. U'mitzvot, evet mitzvah shemo, you must keep his mitzvot. Ki ze kol adam, that's the whole purpose of a human being. So you need to do two things in your life. To develop your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to know very well his Torah and how to observe it. If I were to put it into practical disciplines, the study of all matters related to Emunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, primarily, the primary way to have Emunah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tefillah. Tefillah. Tefillah is Emunah, period. Which is why when you go somewhere and their Tefillah is running a marathon, you have to ask what kind of Emunah is found there. Tefillah is Tefillah. It's the primary exercise showing that we believe in the creator of the universe, that he listens to our prayers, and that we have a relationship with him. The second, limud halacha, to know halacha well. To know well, to own this. This is a person needs to know. HaKadosh Baruch Hu and what I'm supposed to do in this world. Go back. So what does it mean? Beware, my son, do not make too many books. Now there definitely is an opinion, one minority opinion, who says it's the opposite. He reads it, be careful, my son, to make many books. Like, yes, you should make many books. But it is so obvious to me that that is not the Peshat here in the Pasuk. Let me explain to you what it means. Imagine how simple halakha used to be when there was just a book that we all agreed on, that we could follow. I'm thinking, for example, the Mishneh Torah. Imagine, there's a Mishneh Torah. We could all agree on it. We'd all do it. Shalom, myself, go home. But that wasn't enough. And then we wrote more books, and then more books. And then Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch. You ever seen a Shulchan Aruch before? Shulchan Aruch was supposed to be studied how often? Some of you would mention. Once a month. It was broken into 30 pieces. Now today, your Shulchan Aruch takes up a whole shelf. And you ever open a Shulchan Aruch? It's 2 sentences of Shulchan Aruch and 1,000 commentaries. Shlomo HaMelech is warning us of overcomplicating the Torah. Imagine you lived, go back in time, in the times of the Talmud. So to be a Jew who was literate in Judaism, what did you have to know? Which books did you have to know? You're living in the generation of the Talmud.
The writings of the prophets and the Torah.
So the Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, very good, keep going.
Times of the
Talmud.
The Talmud, so would the Mishnah have already been?
Yes, the Mishnah, very good, the Mishnah. That's what you need to know. Now what happens if there was some detail that you didn't figure out from that information? What would you do?
You would go to a Chacham and ask.
You'd go ask the Chacham, big deal. Now you keep moving. That's what you had to know. And as the generations move forward, and we write, and we write, and we write, or if I'm going to say we complicate, and we complicate, and we complicate, there are questions that people ask sometimes in halakha. And you say, only somebody who's alive today, who was bored, who has nothing better to do, could ask such a question. How could it be that 2,000 years of Judaism, that didn't bother anybody? And all of a sudden, right now, this became the raging issue of the Torah. You have to be careful, my son, not to make too much Torah. Too much Torah is going to complicate everybody's life. Now that you know this, I want to share with you what Rabbi Chaim David Halevy does this pasuk using our Chachamim. In the footnote at the bottom of 56, it says, Shuv he'ir Adonai enai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu again lit up my eyes. Umatzati rayon ze mevoar b'divrei rabotenu. I found this matter explicit in the writings of our rabbis. Darash Rav Arava says, Mai dichtiv, what does it mean? V'yoter mehem abeni zaher asot sefarim harbe en ketz. Do not make too many books. Bini, my son, hizaher b'divrei sofrim yoter midivrei Torah. You should be more particular about the words of our rabbis more than the words of the Torah. Shedivrei Torah yesh behen aseh velo ta'aseh. The words of the Torah have both mitzvot aseh, active commandments, velo ta'aseh, and passive commandments. I don't like the words positive and negative commandments because all of a sudden I have a whole category of mitzvot that are negative. V'divrei sofrim, and the words of our chachamim, kol ha'over al divrei sofrim chayav mita. Anyone who violates the words of our chachamim is liable for the death penalty. Chachamim tell us in Masechet Berachot on page 4, the same halakha in the context of, if I'm not mistaken, Aravit. Shema tomar im yesh behem mamash ratzanu modivei sofrim mipnei ma lo nichtavu b'Torah atzma. Maybe you'll ask me, if the words of Chachamim are so important that every one of them you're liable for the death penalty, whereas the Torah has different stages. Some you're liable, some you're not. Then why were they not written in the Torah itself if it was so important? Amar Kara, the pasuk says, Asot sefarim harbe en ketz. To not make endless books. Upiresh Rashi there explains, L'chach lo nichtavu. Therefore, the rabbinic mitzvot were not written in the Torah. She'en ketz la'asot sefarim harbe b'chol ele. Because it would be too much. To write down all of these things would create too many books. It would further complicate the Torah. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is using this teaching of our Chachamim in Masechet Eruvin to share that when you over-standardize something, when you make it too rigid, there are too many legal details, too many rules. At the end of the day, at some point in time, something will have to change, and you end up breaking the whole Torah. Instead, there are general rules, and those rules that are in between, that govern everyday details, they fluctuate based on the generation. Min kudat re'ot zot, go up above the line. From this perspective, it would be proper in the Israeli government that our Knesset terem tadun bechok kolshehu, before it engages in any legal question, tazmin eleha talmid chacham, will invite to it a talmid chacham, habaki b'halacha, who's an expert in halacha, v'halan be'olama shel halacha, and who lives inside of the world of halacha. Shirtzeh bifnehem, who will lecture to them or speak to them, al dat Torah bechok hanidon, on the opinion of the Torah in this particular matter. If they're dealing with homelessness and halakha, then you should have a chacham who knows about halakha. All he lives is halakha, and should come share with them the values of the Torah regarding homelessness, the values of the Torah regarding medication or medical insurance for everyone, the values of the Torah regarding A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever that might be. This thing, will enrich the knowledge of the lawmakers from a Jewish legal perspective. ויסייע בידם לתאם חוק מודרני שהמדינה זקוקה, page 57 לו, לפי צורכי התפתחותה ליסודות ההלכה. And it will allow the lawmaker, they're not poskim, they're not going to become dayanim now, but that's not their job. They're not sitting in a bedin. They're sitting in a knesset. It will allow for the lawmaker to create a new modern law that is based on the principles of the ancient one. שעליה נאמר, and about that halakha it says, ומי גוי גדול. And who is like this great nation? Please, do me a favor. You're this many years learning Torah with me. The word goy is not a derogatory word. I don't know why in certain circles it is. Goy means nation. The greatest of all the goyim in the world are the Jews. Umi goy gadol, it's a mikra meforashu. Asher lo chukim u'mishpatim tzedikim, that has such righteous laws. Kehillat Torah azot, like this Torah asher anochi noten lifnehem hayom, that I'm giving before you today. The reaction of the world when they look at Jewish law should be, this is so incredible. There is no nation in the world that has a legal system as beautiful as this one. Those laws were not spoken. This pasuk was not said about the laws of meat and milk, or the laws of shatnez, or the laws of what's going to happen if on Shabbat the food is only 73% cooked and I put it on a plata, and what's going to be in the plata has the heat element on the bottom or the heat element on the top. I'm not belittling those halachot, but that's not the halakha that the non-Jew around us is going to say, wow, look what an incredible nation Am Yisrael has. When they wear their tefillin, they have black on both sides of the straps of their tefillin. On the front side, and if chas v'shalom, the tefillin will get flipped around, also on the black side. Baruch Hashem. That's not the side of halakha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, wow, the nations will look at you. But when they see our values for running a nation, our social values, I saw an interesting interview today, something you might not know. Maybe I shouldn't tell you afterwards. Okay, so here you find that there's a desire to inspire Am Yisrael by giving them laws that are righteous, modern laws based on an ancient system. Give me one moment. Today, I'll tell you, it's okay. I saw a short interview on Israeli news with a certain Kabbalist. And they asked him what his dream was for society. And he said something that made the people in the newsroom, like, they got all very confused. Anyone here familiar with Kabbalah? Any Kabbalists in the crowd, or people who studied Kabbalah a little? Anyone familiar in particular with the Kabbalah of the Sulam? Bala Sulam. You know who Bala Sulam was? Okay, there's a book of the Zohar. Let's put aside who wrote the Zohar for a moment. On the Zohar is a commentary written not so long ago, the turn of the last century, by Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag. Rabbi Ashlag was a famous Ashkenazi Mekubal. In the early editions of his work, he had a haskama, a letter of approbation, both from Rabbi Kook and Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. In later editions, as Rav Kook fell out of popularity with certain camps, they removed the first haskama, but in some books there's still a blank page where it used to be. Is anyone familiar with the political orientation of Rabbi Ashlag? No. Okay, I see I'm in a room of people who don't know Kabbalah. By the way, even if you don't want to be Mekubalim, you have to know Kabbalah. You have to know what you don't believe in also if you don't believe in it. It's very important. So, the Mekubalim of the Ashlag dynasty are communists. They're very proudly communist. It's a big part of their belief system. Their whole understanding is that Kabbalah is creating a communist society. A lot of anarchy, that's part of that. It's a very big part of who they are. And what people don't realize then is that when they interview these rabbis who are part of this dynasty, that when you speak to them about things, they're very open about very many things, but all of a sudden it comes to questions like, so what do you think about wages and living and salaries? And the attitude is everybody should work and nobody should get paid. Everybody should share their wages with everybody else. Everyone should feed everybody else. It's one of the most anti-capitalist, Kabbalistic circles in the world. Sometimes you have to know when you're reading something, which kind of chachamim you are consulting with. Because whenever you speak to a chacham, you're going to get the bias of that chacham. And that brings us to the next section. Omnam, yesh bakneset talmidei chachamim. By the way, if you've never explored Rabbi Ashlag's Kabbalah, or communism according to Kabbalah, I suggest that you make some time in your life, or not too long, don't waste too much of your life, a little bit of time to explore the values of communism through the lens of Sulam Kabbalah. And then stop and go back to learning regular Torah. Omnam yesh bakneset talmidei chachamim. In the Knesset, there are Talmidei Chachamim. V'afilu musmachim l'Rabbanut. You even have Knesset members that have rabbinic ordination. Shayu Rabbanim b'foal. Some of them even served as rabbis, says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy. V'shem gam ata Rabbanim b'foal. And even now they're rabbis. V'shicholim nechahen b'Rabbanut. And they even have the capability, rabbinically, to serve as rabbis. V'yediatam b'Torah inam min haktanot. And their Torah knowledge is not nothing. It's not superficial. It's genuine Torah knowledge. Nonetheless, says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, I would not bring those rabbis to speak about political issues. Yesh erech rav, there's tremendous value, lederech chashivato shel tamid chacham, through the way of thinking of a tamid chacham, shetorato umanuto, the Torah is his life. V'shechol asakav b'Torah bilvad, v'shechol isko b'Torah bilvad, that all that he dabbles in is Torah, that's all he deals with. Before you jump, please remember that Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is an old school Sephardic Chacham. And he's going to say certain words that I'm sure will trigger some of you, and that's okay. You learn to overcome yourself. And he's going to redefine in a classical Sephardic way what he means. He says the following. Ikar isuko shel chaver knesset hu mediniyut. The main job of a Knesset member is policy, politics. That's what they deal in. ודרך חשיבתו הראשונה והטבעית היא מדינית. And the primary way in which a politician thinks is politically. Everything is a political move. Everything is a political conversation. Everything is caught up with the way that we make policy, the way we pass policy. That's all that they think about. וגם את ההלכה הוא יבין בכוח תת-הכרתי. And subconsciously, he will apply the same style of thinking to halacha as well. במונחים ובדרכי חשיבה מדיניים. He will apply his political mentality to his Torah. מה שאין כן תלמיד חכם הלן כל חייו בעומקה של הלכה. That's contrary to the way a תלמיד חכם who is just a תלמיד חכם will look at halacha. הוא יגיש את ההלכה על יסודותיה, עקרונותיה, סעיפיה וענפיה כנתינתה מסיני. His only purpose in life is to continue teaching Torah the way that it was taught on Har Sinai. Zot ve'od, furthermore, גם דרכי חשיבתו במסלול מיוחד ושונה מחשיבה רגילה, he's used to thinking about things in a very different way than other people do, because his whole life he spends time thinking in ways that are different than the way other people do. וזה מה שנקרא דעת תורה. And this is what we call Dat Torah. So we're not talking about Das Torah, which in some circles exists, that you go to the rabbi and you ask him a question and he meditates in his magical crystal ball and he gives you an answer. We're not talking about that. Now, Rav Peretz very much agreed in this mentality also. There are chachamim that are primarily chachamim. And even if you come to discuss with them a matter that is not a matter of Torah, but they have the capability and understanding to understand what is being spoken about, they can provide an essentially Torah way to view that same question and that same problem. וזה מה שנקרא דעת תורה, מחשבה שהתפתחה בכיוון מיוחד להבנת כל עניין ברוח התורה, לרבות ההלכה עצמה. It is a person who has a mentality where the whole mentality is how to understand things according to the Torah, halakha included, day-to-day life included, politics included. And this is a crucial part of recognizing which chacham do we want to ask halakha questions to. Now I know that I'm coming today in the year 2024 to all kinds of people who've heard all kinds of things, like rabbi, just stay out of politics. That's the most popular opinion that exists in the world. You instead prefer to go get your politics from criminals and crooks and radio show hosts and even the Jewish ones whose kippot are not bigger than their thumbnails, and all kinds of other people that want to go learn Torah from them. I want to hear politics from them, but never chalila should I hear politics from a person who knows what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from me. But on top of that, to recognize that there are people in the world who are biased, even among chachamim, and that their bias is very clearly apparent in everything that they say. And I feel this today much more than I ever did. In the coming days, I'm publishing a book along with a number of my chavarim. Eulogies, teaching stories from Mori Harav Yaakov Peretz, Arei Kaparat Mishkavo. Mamash, I'm talking to you in a couple of days. And if you look through all of the same things that come out, was a person who you can ask questions to, who had no political leanings. I don't know if I can explain to you what that means. A person who lived their whole life in this world and was aware of this world and didn't hide from reality of what was going on in the world. But you never knew the answer you were going to get because there were no external calculations on how you make halachic decisions. Or let me say it in this way. Had Harav Peretz known how to play politics, maybe he would have been the chief rabbi of Israel. Maybe. He always told me that he's not a good liar. And because he's not a liar, so he can never be a chief rabbi. But that's part of the job description of a politician. A person that you can go ask a question to in halakha, and it's not, well, we belong to this camp, and in this camp, our rabbis say we're supposed to do things a certain way, or are we, the gedolim of this generation, say that, or the chachamim here, or you're Sephardic, you must be, or you're Ashkenazi, you must. Never, ever, ever did we ever hear such things. Ever. Ever. I don't mean sometimes. Never. And today I feel like I'm in a world where who can you ask questions to? Who's not nogea b'davar? They're not in some capacity tainted by the worldview they pledge allegiance to, and that worldview is not synonymous with Torah. I'm going to give you an example. Harav Peretz never appreciated the word orthodoxy. People think I made it up. It's not me. I'm not so original. Tell us things like, are you loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or are you loyal to orthodoxy? To make up your mind, because there are going to be times where orthodoxy comes in direct clash with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What are you going to choose? Are you primarily a student of our Chachamim, or are you a student of whatever contemporary Judaism tells you have to be? Make up your mind, and once you make up your mind, then you'll be free to make the choices you can make, but if not. Your whole life you'll be walking around with a leash on you because your taskmasters will tell you how you can think and what you can do and what you can believe. I'll tell you from personal experience, you'll never win the popularity contest with that mentality, but you definitely will win the feeling of what it is like to walk on the path of truth with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the kind of chacham you're looking for. A chacham who is purely a chacham. במידה ותקפיד הכנסת, לבל תקובל שום חוק שיסתור או יעקור שום דין מדיני התורה. If we reach a situation where the Knesset will never pass a halacha that directly contradicts the Torah, ובמידה וחוקיה יהיו מותאמים לרוח משפטי התורה ומבוססים על עקרונותיה, and assuming that the laws that it will pass going forward will be founded on the guiding principles of our Torah, הרי שלזאת תיקרא מדינת חוק על פי ההלכה. The modern state of Israel will fit the legal definition of a Jewish civil government in our times. ויאמר בבהירות, and I must clarify, לזאת אין לקרוא בשום פנים חקיקה דתית. You cannot then call whatever laws this Knesset will pass religious legislation or Jewish legislation. איפכא מסתבר, the opposite. זו חקיקה חילונית המבוססת על ההלכה. This is secular law or civil law, which draws its inspiration from religious law, but in no way is it religious law. Religious law is determined in a bedin, in a Sanhedrin. This is civil law that has received its inspiration from Torah law. כל זאת, and all of this is true, עד אשר נזכה לשיבת שופטינו כבראשונה ויועצינו כבתחילה. This all will apply until we merit to that dream of our forefathers, where our righteous judges will return to the Sanhedrin. עד להקמת סנהדרין, בתי דין של תורה אשר ידונו על פי דיני תורה ממש. Then we will finally have a Sanhedrin which will rule according to the actual laws of the Torah. וכפי שכבר נתבאר, על מטרת בתי דין אלה להשלים את הסידור המדיני, and like we've explained previously, the purpose of the Sanhedrin is not to create a civil and just society. That's not the job. That's the job of the civil courts. כלומר, תקנת החברה. זאת ימשיכו לעשות גם אז בתי דין ממלכתיים שידונו על פי חוקי המלכות. The laws of the state of Israel, the civil courts of the state of Israel, will continue to create civil legislature that fixes the problems in society even after a Sanhedrin. כלומר, meaning, חקיקה חילונית על פי ההלכה. Secular law based on halakha. וכפי כל אשר נדבר עליה, like we already explained above. By the way, somebody wants to ask me why I don't bow to the office of Chief Rabbi of Israel. They view it somehow in today's Judaism, some kind of anti-Zionist attitude. That would be in me. It's to the contrary. I'm a Zionist. I say Hallel and Yom HaAtzmaut. Many people don't. For me, the state of Israel is one of the greatest Jewish accomplishments in history. One thing I don't accept. I accept the right of the state of Israel to create civil law. Absolutely. I do not accept the right of the state of Israel to appoint rabbis who will create religious law. That I don't accept. How could a religious leader or how could a religious law be dictated to us by a non-religious government? I mean, when one observes the laws of the chief rabbinate, they're observing the laws of a clerk who works for the prime minister's office. With all due respect, I have other Talmidei Chachamim I'd rather consult with. Ve'ilu batei din shel Torah. The batei din of the Torah, the Sanhedrin, mataratam ladun ha'am, their whole purpose is to judge the people b'mishpat amiti tzodek, in true righteous judgment. והוא משפט התורה, that's the laws of the Torah. שאינו מתכוון לתיקון הסדר החברתי, because those laws of the Torah, you recall from the Ram, are not there to fix the problems that exist in society. אלא במגמה האלוהית שבדיני התורה. The purpose of the Sanhedrin and its courts are for the divine aspect of the Torah. You remember this part? We discussed it a few months back. כדי, quoting, שימשך מהם העניין האלוהי. That from the courts of the Sanhedrin, should come the divinity, the divine aspects of the Torah to the Jewish people. Hashrat Shekhinat Adonai b'Yisrael. The purpose of the laws of the Sanhedrin are to cause the people of Israel to become a dwelling place for the Shekhinah. Mamash ka'avodat hakorbanot b'mikdash, similar to how we explain the sacrifices in the temple. Uchedivrei Haran she'etaknu le'el, and like the words of Rabbeinu Nisim that we copied before. The Sanhedrin does not dabble in areas of law that are to run day-to-day society, to fix problems in society. It is there for the purpose of bringing divinity to the people. And therefore it operates in a very narrow space. The government of Israel has the right to create civil law, which is intended to fix everyday things, all kinds of problems, and different kinds of laws. And it will continue to do that even after we merit Hashiva Shoftenu Kevarishona V'Yo'atzenu Kevatechina. Maybe with the time that I have, let's do one more paragraph. I was hoping maybe to finish the essay, but let's see. At the bottom of 57. Kol ze mevusas. All of this is based on Yisod Echad, one foundation. Shekol mitzvot haTorah shemkoran b'mitzvot sheben adam lemakom. That all of the mitzvot that are between us and God, v'yisodan be'emunah shebalev, and they are all in the category of mitzvot that are in our heart, between us and our Creator. Lo shum hashpa'a yeshira al sidrei hachevra, the parts that have no direct impact on societal life, on page 57, nisharim omnam le'et ata ad bo Mashiach tzidkenu b'rshut hayachid. They will stay for right now until the final redemption. They will stay in the domain, in the private domain. Mitzvot ele, about these mitzvot, Naramaz Haran, Rabbeinu Nisim alluded to the fact, bidvarav shetaknu le'el, להעמיד חוקי התורה על תילם עם היות שאין באותה עבירה הפסד מדיני כלל. They were talking about the right to rule on these laws in a way that does not cause for society to suffer. וזה תפקיד הסנהדרין בלבד, that's the domain of the Sanhedrin. ואילו המלכות לא הייתה מתערבת בשדר זה כל עיקר. The government, the civil government, never involved itself in this area of law at all. דרך משל, for example, מי שזכה בדין הסנהדרין בעבירה על חילול שבת, בגלל שההוכחות המסיבתיות לא הספיקו על פי הדין, ואם רצו בתי הדין, הענישו בהוראת שעה. Imagine a person did something on Shabbat that the Sanhedrin could not prosecute them for because there was no evidence that would work in a Sanhedrin court, only circumstantial evidence. A Bedin, the regular court, could punish them, remember, as a subcategory of the king's law, they were able to do that. אף על פי כן, nonetheless, גם במצוות אלו הנקראות שמאיות, these mitzvot that are, I don't have a good translation for them. Let's just call them the divine laws. לא תהיה מדינת ישראל מדינת חוק על פי ההלכה, באם אחד מחוקיה יבטל אחת מהן. It's assuming that the state of Israel will never get rid of any of the laws that are divine laws. אלא שאין ספק שגם בשטח זה לא יקרה כזאת מעולם, and it's obvious that this will never happen in Israel. חלילה להעלות על הדעת, it's impossible to even imagine שביטול השבת, that the state of Israel would cancel Shabbat completely, or איסור כשרות, they would prohibit us from keeping kasher, or chametz בפסח בחקיקה ממש, the past legislature that says it's forbidden for Jewish people to refrain from chametz on Pesach. He added it as a note only because he had to, but really that's not the most relevant thing that he said today in our shiur. I'm looking at the clock, and I'm looking at the pages that I have left. Let's do this. Let me ask you this. How many of you would be able to come to Shiur next Monday? I know it's the week of Rosh Hashanah, but it's still not Rosh Hashanah. Are you still able to come to Shiur on Monday?
We're not going anywhere.
Okay.
Yes, Rabbi.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's leave, because I really want to get into the stories from the Tanakh here. I don't want to just run through them now to finish them in a few minutes before the class. We'll hold the Shiur right here. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is going to take us to the next part of this conversation, which was a raging battle that took place in the years in the state of Israel before the 6-Day War. Very similar to what happened here before October 7th, but in a different light. All about religious coercion and religious legislature, and are the religious people trying to take over our country and force religion down our throats, and all of that, and all of that kind of became muted temporarily because of everything that happened in the 6-Day War. A little bit of what happened in Israel with the reform of the court systems, and then October 7th came, and then a little bit of similar narrative. He's going to walk us through a few stories in the Tanakh. If I could, I'd like to give you some homework before we go. If you could, for the next shiur, and I will do my best tonight to post them to the Google Classroom, I'd be even more grateful if someone could text me what I'm about to tell you. That way I can post it to the Google Classroom later. I want you to look at the story of Yehoiada in the book of Melachim Bet, Kings 2, chapter 11. I also want you to look at the story in the days of Yoshiyahu in Kings 2, Melachim Bet, chapter 23. I want you to compare those two stories with the two stories that we find in two more places. Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah chapter 34, and Ezra chapter 10. With Yirmiyahu, you see a story about letting slaves free, and with Ezra, you see a story of divorcing the non-Jewish wives that the people of Israel were living with. I would like for those four stories to be very fresh in your mind when we get into next week's shiur, because that will be the thrust of next week's shiur. And with that, we will wrap up this entire essay and continue on to something fresh right after the Chagim.